Marianne Cole drops to her knees on the cold marble floor of Alexander Reyes's office before he even has the chance to stand. Her hands shake as she clutches a faded photograph to her chest, knuckles white, breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "Please don't send her away," she gasps, voice cracking on every word. "Please, Mr. Reyes. Please." Alexander stares down at her, genuinely startled, one hand still resting on the eviction file he'd signed off on 20 minutes ago without a second thought. He's fired employees, ended business partnerships, walked away from men begging for their lives without flinching. A woman on her knees in his office is not something he's prepared for. "Get up," he says, voice controlled but edged with discomfort he doesn't fully understand. "Whoever you are, this isn't necessary." "You don't understand," Marianne says, still kneeling, tears streaking down her face despite her obvious effort to hold them back. "My daughter has nowhere else to go. Lily is 17. If you evict us, she has nowhere. Nowhere, Mr. Reyes. Do you understand what that means for a girl her age?" Alexander's jaw tightens. "You're 3 months behind on rent for a property I own. I've given more grace on that unit than any other tenant in my portfolio. I can't keep making exceptions." "I'm not asking for an exception," Marianne says, finally rising, though her legs visibly tremble beneath her. "I'm asking you to remember a debt your family owes mine." The words land strange in the room, sharp enough that Alexander's hand stills completely on his desk. "My family owes your family nothing. I didn't even know your name until this morning." "You will," Marianne says quietly. "Give me 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 2 minutes and then you can throw us out if you still want to." Alexander studies her, the desperation etched into every line of her face, the careful way she's still holding that photograph like it might shatter if she loosens her grip even slightly. Something about her certainty, the total absence of manipulation in her voice, makes him pause. 2 minutes, he says finally, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. "Then this conversation is over." Marianne steps forward, hands still trembling, and sets the photograph gently on his desk, sliding it toward him like an offering. Alexander looks down and his breath catches sharply in his chest. It's his father. Younger than Alexander ever remembers seeing him, standing outside a modest house Alexander doesn't recognize, one arm wrapped around a much younger Marianne, the other cradling an infant against his shoulder. "That's..." Alexander's voice trails off, disbelief flooding his features. "That's my father." "Your father," Marianne confirms, voice steadying now that she has his full attention, "supported my family quietly for over a decade. Long before you ever took over this business. He never told you, did he?" Alexander's hand hovers over the photograph, refusing to touch it, like doing so might make the impossible fully real. "Told me what?" "That he owed my family a debt," Marianne says. "A debt of honor from long before either of us were born into the lives we ended up living. He paid it quietly every month for years. Rent, groceries, my husband's medical bills before he passed. All of it, never once asking for anything back." Alexander's chest tightens, a vein pulsing faintly at his temple as decades of assumptions about his father begin quietly, catastrophically, to crack. "Why," he manages finally, "would he do that?" Marianne's eyes fill with fresh tears, this time not from fear, but from the weight of a truth she's carried alone far too long. "Because your father wasn't just the man you remember from boardrooms and business dinners, Mr. Reyes. He was also a man capable of a kindness he never once let the world see." Alexander stares at the photograph, at his father's unguarded smile, at a version of the man he thought he understood completely that he's never once glimpsed before. He has no idea, sitting frozen behind his desk with an eviction notice still open on his computer screen, that the next hour is about to unravel everything he believed about his father's legacy, and force him to decide whether he's willing to become the same kind of man in secret that his father apparently always was. Marianne Cole is 44 years old, and the last 6 years have aged her far beyond it. She sits now in the chair across from Alexander's desk, the one she was too frightened to take earlier, hands folded tightly in her lap, still catching her breath from the desperation of moments before. Her husband, David, passed away 6 years ago after a long battle with a heart condition that drained their savings long before it finally took his life. She remembers the exact weight of that grief, how it settled into every corner of their small house, how Lily, only 11 at the time, Stopped speaking for almost a month afterward. She still keeps his old flannel shirt on her bed, Marianne says quietly, gaze drifting somewhere distant. 6 years later. Won't let me wash it, says it still smells like him if she doesn't. Alexander says nothing, still processing the photograph on his desk, still trying to reconcile the father he remembers with the one apparently hidden inside these fading images. Lily Cole is 17 now, a junior at the local public high school, quiet and studious in the particular way children become when they've had to grow up faster than they should have. She works part-time at a coffee shop near their apartment, saves nearly everything she earns, terrified in ways she rarely voices out loud of the family losing the only stability they have left. She doesn't know how bad it's gotten, Marianne admits, voice thinning further. She thinks I'm handling it. She thinks we're fine. I've let her believe that because she's already lost enough. Alexander's expression shifts slightly, something in his carefully guarded composure softening despite himself. He spent 15 years building a reputation that makes grown men flinch, and yet the exhaustion in this woman's voice unsettles him more than any threat ever has. Why now? He asks finally. If my father helped you for years, why did the support stop? Why are you 3 months behind? Marianne's hands tighten in her lap. Your father passed away 8 years ago, Mr. Reyes. The support stopped the day he did. I never told anyone because I didn't know how and because some part of me believed asking would somehow betray the privacy he always insisted on. 8 years, Alexander repeats, disbelief tightening his voice. You've been managing alone for 8 years, and this is the first time you've ever come forward? I managed for 6 of those years working 2 jobs, Marianne says, chin lifting slightly despite her exhaustion. I only started falling behind after my hours got cut at the hospital where I do administrative work. I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Reyes. I'm asking you to understand why I'm here instead of simply accepting the eviction. Alexander studies her for a long moment, something calculating and careful behind his eyes even as emotion visibly wars beneath the surface. You said my father supported you because of a debt of honor, he says slowly. What debt? What connects our families? Marianne's breath catches slightly, old grief and old secrets both flickering behind her expression. That's not a story I can tell you in 2 minutes, Mr. Reyes. It's not even a story I fully understand myself. I only know pieces, things your father told me over the years, careful and incomplete. Then tell me what you know, Alexander says, leaning forward now, genuine urgency replacing his earlier cold dismissal. Before Marianne can answer, Alexander's phone buzzes sharply against the desk. He glances at it, a message from his property manager, confirming the eviction crew is scheduled to arrive at Marianne's address within the hour unless he cancels the order immediately. His jaw tightens. He silences the phone without responding, eyes returning to Marianne's face. Keep talking, he says. We have more than 2 minutes now. Marianne's shoulders sag slightly with relief, though the tension in her expression doesn't fully ease. Your father used to visit us quietly, usually in the evenings, never staying long. He'd bring groceries sometimes, always cash for the rent, always insisting we never mention it to anyone. I asked him once why he was so insistent on secrecy. What did he say? Marianne's eyes well up again, memory pulling at something tender and painful in equal measure. He said some debts aren't meant to be repaid publicly. He said honoring them quietly was the only way that actually meant anything. Alexander sits back, the words landing heavier than he expects. Old grief for a father he thought he understood completely rising unexpectedly in his chest. What debt? He asks again, voice rougher now. What did my father owe your family that he'd hidden for over a decade? Marianne hesitates, glancing toward the photograph still resting between them on the desk, toward the infant cradled in his father's arms in that faded image neither of them has fully explained yet. That, she says quietly, is a story that starts before either of us were born, Mr. Reyes. And it's a story I'm not entirely sure you're ready to hear. Alexander's chest tightens further, curiosity and dread tangling together as he stares at the photograph one more time. At an infant he's beginning to suspect matters far more to this conversation than he initially understood. Alexander picks up the photograph finally, studying it more closely now, fingers tracing the edge of the faded image. His father looks impossibly young here, maybe 30, none of the gray that eventually streaked his temples. None of the guarded weariness Alexander remembers from his own childhood. Who's the baby? he asks, voice carefully controlled despite the questions multiplying rapidly behind his eyes. Marianne's breath catches slightly. That's Lily. Barely 3 months old in that photo. Alexander's head snaps up. Lily? Your daughter is 17. That photograph is clearly older than that. It is, Marianne confirms. That's not the Lily you'd meet today. That's... She hesitates, something complicated flickering behind her expression. That's a different chapter of the story, Mr. Reyes. One I need you to hear in order or none of it will make sense. Alexander sets the photograph down carefully, jaw tight. Then start from the beginning. All of it. Marianne takes a slow breath, hands finally steadying slightly in her lap. My mother worked for your grandfather. Housekeeper back when your family's business was still finding its footing, decades before you were even born. Alexander's brow furrows. I don't understand what that has to do with. Let me finish, Marianne says, gentle but firm. My mother discovered something during her employment. Something about how your grandfather's early business dealings were conducted. Something that could have destroyed the family's reputation entirely if it had come out publicly at the time. Alexander's stomach tightens, old family mythology about his grandfather's rise to power suddenly feeling considerably less certain than it did an hour ago. She never told anyone, Marianne continues. She kept the secret her entire life, out of loyalty, out of fear, out of complicated feelings I never fully understood even after she explained it to me. Your grandfather knew she knew. He made sure, quietly, that her silence was rewarded for the rest of her life. Reward how? Financial support. Discreet, consistent, never publicly acknowledged, Marianne says. When your grandfather passed, your father inherited that responsibility along with everything else. He continued supporting my mother until her death, and then when I became a young widow myself with a newborn daughter, he simply continued the arrangement with me. Alexander sits back hard, processing the weight of generations of hidden obligations suddenly unraveling in front of him. So this isn't about me. It's not even about you really. It's an inherited debt my family has been quietly paying for decades. Not entirely, Marianne says, and something in her voice shifts, careful and hesitant in a way that immediately raises Alexander's suspicion. What aren't you telling me? He asks, voice sharpening. Marianne's hands tremble again, and for a long moment she doesn't answer, gaze fixed somewhere just past his shoulder like she's steadying herself for something far heavier than what she's already revealed. Your father didn't just continue an inherited arrangement out of obligation, she says finally, voice barely above a whisper. He continued it because he genuinely cared about what happened to my family. He visited more than the arrangement required. He asked about Lily's schooling. He remembered her birthday every single year without fail. Alexander's jaw tightens further. That doesn't sound like an obligation. That sounds like something more personal, Marianne finishes quietly. Yes. The room goes silent except for the faint hum of the building's climate control, Alexander's mind racing through implications he isn't entirely prepared to voice out loud. Are you saying, he starts carefully, that my father and you... No, Marianne cuts in quickly, firmly, some old protectiveness rising sharp in her voice. It wasn't like that, Mr. Reyes. Your father was deeply loyal to your mother's memory, even after she passed. What existed between us was never romantic. It was something else. Something he never fully explained, even to me. Alexander exhales slowly, some tension easing slightly, though the mystery only deepens further. Then what was it? I think, Marianne says slowly, choosing each word with visible care, your father saw something in helping my family that he couldn't find anywhere else in his life. A place where his kindness didn't need to be strategic or calculated, or attached to anything he'd ever have to explain in a boardroom. Alexander's chest tightens painfully at that, an old, unfamiliar grief surfacing for a father he's beginning to realize he understood far less than he ever believed. His phone buzzes again, more insistent this time. He glances down and his stomach drops sharply. A second message from his property manager, this one carrying an edge of urgency he doesn't like. The eviction crew is already en route, sir. They left before your earlier message came through. ETA 15 minutes. Alexander's head snaps up, an alarm flashing across his expression. They're already on their way to your apartment. Marianne's face drains of color instantly. What? No, please, you said. I know what I said, Alexander says, already standing, already reaching for his phone to call the crew directly. The order went out before I could stop it. We need to move. Now. Marianne's breath catches sharp with panic. Lily's home right now. She has no idea any of this is happening. If she sees them arriving, if she sees our things being. We're not letting that happen, Alexander says, voice hardening into the kind of command that's carried him through 15 years of high-stakes decisions. Get in my car. We're leaving right now. He has no idea, grabbing his coat and moving fast toward the door, that the next 15 minutes are about to become a race against time, and that Lily, unaware of any of this unfolding, is about to come face to face with a stranger who's about to change the entire direction of her life. The drive across town happens in tense, clipped silence, Marianne gripping the door handle in Alexander's car, phone pressed to her ear, trying desperately to reach her daughter's cell without success. She's probably still at work, Marianne says, voice tight with barely restrained panic. Her shift ends at 4. If the crew gets there before I do. They won't, Alexander says, weaving through traffic with controlled urgency, jaw set hard. I'm calling them directly. He dials the property management line, voice sharp and commanding the second the call connects. This is Alexander Reyes. I need the eviction crew at the Maple Street address to stand down immediately. That's a direct order. A pause on the other end, then a hesitant response Alexander clearly doesn't like. Sir, they're already on site. They've started with the exterior notice postings. Alexander's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. Tell them to stop. Right now. I don't care what's already posted. Nothing gets moved, nothing gets touched. He hangs up, glancing sideways at Marianne, whose hands are pressed hard against her mouth, tears welling despite her obvious effort to hold them together. We're almost there, Alexander says, voice softening slightly despite the tension still coiled through his shoulders. It's going to be okay. Marianne shakes her head slowly, old grief surfacing alongside the immediate panic. You don't understand what this apartment means to us. It's not just where we live. It's the last place David and I chose together before he got sick. Lily's grown up in that home her entire life. If she loses it. Her voice breaks completely, and for a moment she can't continue, memory and fear tangling together too tightly to separate. Tell me about him, Alexander says gently, hoping conversation might steady her through the last few minutes of the drive. David. What was he like? Marianne's breath shudders, but she manages a small, wavering smile despite everything. He was a mechanic. Steady hands, terrible jokes, the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday without being asked. He used to say Lily got his stubbornness and my patience, though I always told him it was clearly the other way around. How did he pass? Congestive heart failure, Marianne says quietly. Diagnosed when Lily was 9, fought it for 2 years longer than the doctors expected. He didn't want her to remember him as sick, so he tried so hard, every single day, to make things feel normal for her. Movie nights. Homework help. He coached her softball team from a folding chair on the sidelines the entire final season, even when he could barely stand for more than an hour at a time. Alexander's chest tightens listening to this, an unexpected ache surfacing for a man he never met, a father whose quiet strength clearly shaped every part of Lily's world even now. Your father came to the funeral, Marianne continues, voice thick with old emotion. Stood in the back, didn't approach anyone, just paid his respects quietly and left before most people even noticed he'd been there. That was 3 days before he first offered to help with the mortgage payments. He never explained why, Alexander says, more a statement than a question at this point. Never fully, Marianne confirms. Just said some debts matter more than the people who created them ever expected them to. Alexander's jaw tightens further, old assumptions about his father's legacy crumbling further with every new piece of this story. He remembers his father in boardrooms, remembers the careful, calculated authority that built an empire, remembers almost nothing of tenderness, almost nothing of secret kindness offered without expectation of anything returned. Why didn't he ever tell me? Alexander asks, voice rougher now, old grief finally breaking through his careful composure. Why keep something like this hidden for my entire life? Marianne's expression softens with genuine sympathy despite her own fear still coiled tight beneath the surface. I think in his own way he was trying to protect you from the weight of it. From feeling obligated to continue something he genuinely wanted to be a choice, not an inheritance. The car pulls onto Maple Street and both of them go rigid at the sight ahead. A small crew still lingers near the modest apartment building, one man taping a notice to the front door despite Alexander's earlier call. "Stop," Alexander shouts, throwing the car into park before it's even fully stopped, moving fast across the sidewalk. "I gave a direct order to stand down." The foreman turns, startled, clearly unprepared for Alexander's personal arrival. "Mr. Reyes, we didn't get confirmation the order was." "You have it now," Alexander says, voice hard, commanding. "Take that notice down. Immediately." The man scrambles to comply, tearing the paper free from the door with hands that visibly shake under Alexander's glare. Marianne rushes past them both toward the building entrance, breath ragged with relief and lingering fear. "Lily," she calls out, voice cracking. "Lily, baby, are you home?" The front door opens and a teenage girl steps out, backpack still slung over one shoulder, confusion and alarm flashing across her face at the sight of a work crew and an unfamiliar man standing on their front steps. "Mom? What's happening? Why is there a truck out here?" "It's okay, baby," Marianne says quickly, crossing the distance to pull Lily into a tight, protective hug. "Everything's okay now. I promise. I promise." Lily's eyes flick over her mother's shoulder toward Alexander, wary and uncertain. "Who is that?" Marianne pulls back slightly, glancing at Alexander with an expression caught somewhere between exhaustion and cautious hope. "That," she says slowly, "is someone whose father knew your father a long time ago. Someone who just made sure we're not losing our home." Lily's confusion deepens, gaze shifting between her mother and the stranger on their front steps, clearly sensing there's far more to this moment than anyone's explaining yet. Alexander steps forward, extending a hand toward the teenage girl, something unfamiliar and tender softening his usually guarded expression. He has no idea, standing on this modest front step with a work crew retreating behind him, that the full weight of his father's secret legacy is about to reveal something even more complicated than a decades-old debt, something that's going to force him to decide exactly what kind of protector he intends to become. 2 days later, Alexander sits across from Marianne in her small kitchen, the modest space smelling faintly of coffee gone lukewarm and the lingering scent of dinner from the night before. He spent the last 48 hours pulling every file he can find related to his father's private financial dealings, determined to understand exactly what debt of honor connects their families so deeply. "I found something," he says, sliding a folder across the table. "My father's private attorney kept records separate from the main business accounts. Payments to your family dating back decades, exactly like you described." Marianne's hands tremble slightly as she opens the folder, old grief surfacing at the sight of her mother's name listed alongside careful, consistent payment records spanning nearly 30 years. "There's something else," Alexander continues, voice tightening. "A letter. Sealed, addressed to me, filed with instructions that it only be opened if this exact situation ever arose. If someone from your family ever came forward needing help after his death." Marianne's breath catches sharp. "He anticipated this? He knew you might need to understand everything eventually?" "Apparently," Alexander says, pulling the sealed envelope from his jacket, hands steady despite the tightness in his chest. "I haven't opened it yet. I wanted you here when I did." He breaks the seal carefully, unfolding a letter written in his father's familiar, precise handwriting, and begins reading aloud, voice growing rougher with every line. "Alexander, if you're reading this, it means Marianne or her daughter came forward needing help, and I'm no longer here to provide it myself. I need you to understand something I never had the courage to explain while I was alive." Alexander's jaw tightens, old grief and fresh understanding tangling together as he continues. "Decades ago, my father built the foundation of everything we have on choices that weren't always honorable. Marianne's mother discovered the truth of those choices and chose silence instead of destruction, protecting our family's name at a cost I never fully repaid her for in her lifetime. That debt became mine and eventually, it became something more than obligation." Marianne's eyes fill with tears, listening to words she's clearly never heard before, understanding finally settling into place for questions she's carried her entire life. "Marianne and her family became the one place in my life where kindness didn't require calculation. Where I could simply help because helping was right, not because it served the business or protected an image. I kept it secret because I feared you'd see it as weakness, or worse, as an inheritance you'd feel obligated to continue rather than a choice you'd make freely. Alexander's voice breaks slightly on the final lines, emotion finally overwhelming his careful composure. If you're reading this, I'm asking you to choose Alexander. Not because you owe this family anything, but because I believe, somewhere beneath everything I built you to become, there's still room in you for the kind of quiet kindness I was always too afraid to show you directly. The kitchen falls silent, both of them processing the weight of a father's confession written specifically for this exact moment. He knew, Alexander finally says, voice hoarse. He knew I'd need this explained eventually. He planned for it. He loved your family enough to protect you from the weight of it, Marianne says softly, and loved mine enough to make sure we'd never be forgotten completely even after he was gone. Before either of them can process further, Marianne's phone buzzes sharply on the counter. She glances at it and her face drains of color instantly. What is it? Alexander asks, an alarm immediately sharpening his voice. It's Lily's school, Marianne says, hands shaking as she reads the message. They're saying she left early today. Unauthorized. Nobody's heard from her since lunch. Alexander's stomach drops. Has she done this before? Never, Marianne says, voice cracking with rising panic. Never once. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. She dials immediately, hands trembling hard enough that she nearly drops the phone twice before the call connects. It rings through to voicemail without answer. Lily, baby, please call me back. Please. I need to know you're safe. Please. Alexander is already moving, pulling out his own phone, dialing his security team with clipped, urgent commands. I need eyes on a 17-year-old girl, last seen near her school roughly 3 hours ago. Send a photo now. What could have happened? Marianne whispers, pacing now, panic visibly overtaking her earlier composure. She's never done anything like this. Never. Alexander's phone buzzes back almost immediately, his security contact's voice tight with urgency. Sir, we've got a hit. A traffic camera near the old Riverside district picked her up on foot about 40 minutes ago. She wasn't alone. Alexander's blood runs cold. Who was with her? Unclear yet. Male, older, kept close to her the entire time the footage shows. She looked distressed, sir. Kept glancing back like she was trying to figure out how to get away. Marianne's knees buckle slightly at the words, catching herself hard against the kitchen counter. No. No. Not my baby. Please, not my baby. We're not losing her, Alexander says, voice hard with fierce resolve, already moving toward the door. I'm calling every resource I have. We find her right now. Marianne grabs her coat, hands still shaking violently. I'm coming with you. Marianne. She's my daughter, Marianne snaps, voice breaking completely now. I am not sitting in this kitchen while someone I don't know is walking around with my child. Alexander doesn't argue further. He simply nods once, grabbing his keys, already dialing additional security as they move fast toward his car. He has no idea that the man seen with Lily on that traffic camera is connected to a far more dangerous piece of his family's hidden history. A debt collector from his father's early, less legitimate years. Someone who's recently discovered exactly who Lily is and precisely what leverage her existence might provide against the Reyes family's current, carefully legitimate empire. The Riverside district sprawls in decaying industrial silence, warehouses long abandoned, the kind of place cameras catch movement but rarely catch clarity. Alexander's car screeches to a stop near the last confirmed sighting, security team already fanning out through the shadows ahead of him. Talk to me, Alexander snaps into his phone, voice tight with barely controlled fury. What do we know about the man with her? Facial recognition just came back, sir, his security chief responds, voice grim. Name's Douglas Kern. Ran collections for your grandfather's early operation decades back. He's the reason Marianne's mother discovered what she discovered in the first place. Alexander's blood runs cold. He's still alive? Still active? Barely legitimate these days, sir, but yes. And it looks like he's recently pieced together who Lily is. Given the timing, given the current tension with your eviction order, we think he's using her to send a message. Marianne, listening from the passenger seat, lets out a sharp, panicked sob. A message? What kind of message? The kind that reminds you of old debts cut both directions, Alexander says grimly, already moving fast toward the nearest warehouse, security fanning out behind him. Stay in the car. Absolutely not, Marianne snaps, already climbing out despite his order. That's my daughter in there. They move together through the industrial corridor, following faint voices echoing from an open warehouse door ahead, tension coiling tighter with every step. Inside, Lily stands rigid against a support beam, wrists bound loosely with rope, tears streaking silently down her face as a heavy-set man in a worn leather jacket paces in front of her. Your family owes mine, Douglas Kern is saying, voice low and menacing, and it's about time somebody remembered that. I don't even know what you're talking about, Lily says, voice trembling but defiant despite her fear. Please just let me go. Please. Enough. Alexander's voice cracks through the warehouse like a gunshot, and Douglas spins sharply, startled at the sudden arrival. Reyes, Douglas says, composure cracking visibly at the sight of Alexander's security team fanning out around the warehouse entrance. This doesn't concern you. She's a 17-year-old girl, Alexander says, voice deadly calm despite the fury radiating beneath it. Everything about this concerns me. Lily's voice breaks with relief the second she spots Marianne rushing past Alexander's security line. Baby, I'm here. I'm here, Marianne sobs, moving fast toward her daughter despite Alexander's hand reaching to stop her. Marianne, wait. Douglas grabs Lily's arm roughly, yanking her back against him, using her as a shield the second Marianne gets too close. Nobody moves. Nobody. Lily cries out sharply, pain flashing across her face as his grip tightens. Let her go, Alexander snarls, stepping forward despite the danger, voice absolute with command. Your father owed my family everything, Douglas snaps, desperation cracking through his composure now. I spent 30 years watching him quietly pay off some widow instead of settling what he actually owed me for keeping his father's secrets buried. I want what's mine. You want money, Alexander says, voice hardening into cold, calculated control. Fine. Name a number. But you let go of her first. Doesn't work like that, Douglas snarls, tightening his grip further, and Lily's whimper cuts sharp through the tense silence. Alexander's jaw tightens, a vein pulsing hard at his temple, years of careful control warring against the raw fury building in his chest. You're right, Alexander says slowly, voice dropping into something far more dangerous. It doesn't work like that. It works like this instead. He nods once, subtle, toward his security chief position just behind Douglas's blind spot. The move happens fast. His security chief lunges, grabbing Douglas's wrist and twisting hard, forcing his grip to release as Lily stumbles free, immediately caught by Marianne's waiting arms. Lily sobs, collapsing into her mother's embrace, whole body shaking. I've got you. I've got you, baby. I've got you, Marianne repeats, voice breaking with overwhelming relief, arms wrapped fiercely around her daughter. Douglas struggles hard against the security chief's grip, cursing, desperate now that his leverage has vanished completely. This isn't over, Reyes. I know things. I know everything. You know things that could have ended my family's reputation decades ago, Alexander says, stepping close now, voice cold with absolute authority. Instead, my father chose to quietly settle every debt that actually mattered. What you're doing right now isn't honoring a debt. It's extortion against a child. She's leverage, Douglas spits, still struggling. That's all she ever was to men like your father. She's a person, Alexander cuts in, fury sharpening every word. And you just made the worst mistake of your life threatening her in front of me. He turns to his security chief, voice hardening into absolute command. Get him out of here. Police, full statement, everything documented. He doesn't walk away from this. As Douglas is dragged out, still shouting empty threats that land like nothing against Alexander's unmoved expression, Alexander turns back toward Marianne and Lily, both of them still clinging to each other, shaking with residual fear and overwhelming relief. Is she hurt? Alexander asks gently, kneeling to Lily's level despite everything. Lily looks up at him, tear-streaked but steady now, something like gratitude flickering behind her fear. You came for me. You don't even know me. I know your family, Alexander says quietly. That was enough. Marianne looks up at him over her daughter's shoulder, exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude warring across her tear-streaked face. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, thank you. You don't have to thank me, Alexander says, voice softening completely now. This is exactly what my father would have done. I'm just finally catching up to who he actually was. Outside the warehouse, sirens approach in the distance, the last threat to Marianne and Lily's safety finally, permanently being dealt with. But Alexander knows this moment is only the beginning of a much longer commitment. One that requires him to decide fully and completely exactly what kind of protector he intends to become for the family his father quietly guarded for decades. 3 weeks later, Marianne's kitchen smells like cinnamon and fresh coffee, sunlight spilling warm across a table now cluttered comfortably with mail, homework, and the ordinary chaos of a household finally breathing easy again. Lily sits at the table finishing a college application essay, occasionally glancing up to ask Alexander's opinion on a sentence. The ease between them now natural in a way neither of them expected a month ago. Does this sound too formal? Lily asks, sliding her laptop toward him. Alexander reads it carefully, the same focus he once brought to contract negotiations now spent helping a 17-year-old craft her nursing school application essay. It's good. Maybe soften this line here. Let them hear your actual voice, not just your accomplishments. Lily makes the edit, nodding thoughtfully, comfortable enough now to argue gently with his suggestions the way she might with any trusted adult in her life. The eviction notice is long gone, the deed to their modest apartment now permanently secured under a trust Alexander established the week after the warehouse confrontation. Protected, he explained carefully, not as charity, but as the continuation of a debt his family had always intended to keep honoring. I still don't fully understand all of it, Lily admits one evening, curled on the couch while Marianne finishes dishes nearby. Why did your dad help us? Why are you still helping now? Alexander considers the question seriously, settling into the chair across from her. My father believed some debts matter more privately than they ever could publicly. I think he was right about that. I think helping your family quietly without needing credit or recognition taught him something about himself he couldn't find anywhere else in his life. And you? Lily asks. What does it teach you? Alexander's expression softens, something unguarded breaking through 15 years of careful control. That power doesn't mean anything if you're not using it to protect people who actually need it. I spent a long time believing strength meant never showing softness. Your family taught me otherwise. Marianne, drying her hands on a dish towel, joins them in the living room, settling beside her daughter with quiet contentment visible in every line of her posture. You know, she says, glancing at Alexander, your father used to sit exactly where you're sitting now. Different chair, different house, but the same quiet way of just being present without needing anything in return. I'm trying to be that person, Alexander admits. It's taken me 36 years and a photograph on my desk to figure out how. Lily laughs softly, warmth easing into her expression in a way that feels entirely different from the frightened girl pulled from a warehouse 3 weeks ago. You're doing okay so far. Over the following weeks, Alexander visits regularly, not out of obligation but genuine, growing connection, checking on Lily's college applications, occasionally joining Marianne for dinner, slowly becoming a fixture in their lives that feels less like inherited responsibility and more like a chosen family. He establishes a foundation quietly in his father's name, ensuring no family connected to the Reyes legacy ever faces uncertainty the way Marianne and Lily once did. He doesn't publicize it. He doesn't need credit. He's learned, finally, exactly what his father meant about debts mattering more privately than publicly. Tonight, on Marianne's small back porch overlooking a modest garden Lily has slowly been restoring since the danger passed, Alexander finds himself watching the last light fade over the quiet neighborhood. Can I ask you something? Marianne says, joining him at the railing. Anything. Do you regret it? Everything that's changed because Lily got taken, because the whole truth came out the way it did. Alexander considers the question carefully, watching Lily through the kitchen window, laughing at something on her phone, safe and steady in a way she wasn't a month ago. I regret that it took a crisis to bring me here, he admits. I regret not knowing sooner, not understanding my father sooner. But I don't regret any of what's happened since. This, he gestures faintly toward the warm kitchen light, toward Lily's laughter drifting through the open window. This is exactly what my father was trying to protect. I just didn't understand it until I was standing inside it myself. Marianne's eyes welled up, watching him with something warm and grateful passing unspoken between them. "Thank you," she says quietly, "for choosing to become the man your father secretly always was." "Thank you," Alexander says, "for trusting me enough to let me try." 8 months later, Lily sits in her first semester of nursing school, textbooks scattered across her dorm room desk, a framed photograph of her father David propped beside her laptop for encouragement during late-night study sessions. Marianne has returned to full-time work at the hospital, hours restored, financial stability secured permanently through the trust Alexander established. Not as charity, she insists whenever anyone asks, but as the continuation of a debt two families have quietly honored across 3 generations now. Alexander's foundation, established quietly in his father's memory, has grown to support 11 families connected to the Reyes legacy across the city, each one facing eviction, medical crisis, or financial hardship met not with public fanfare, but with the same quiet, dignified support his father once offered Marianne's family for decades. "We helped a family last month," his foundation director reported recently, genuine pride evident in her voice. "A grandmother raising 3 grandchildren after losing her son. Covered their rent for a full year, no strings, no publicity, exactly like you asked." Alexander keeps that original faded photograph. His father, young Marianne, infant Lily, framed on his desk now. A permanent reminder of exactly what legacy is supposed to mean when it's built on more than just power. Tonight, the modest apartment Marianne and Lily have called home for 17 years hosts a small gathering. Nothing elaborate, just close friends celebrating Lily's first successful semester, laughter and warm food filling a space that nearly stood empty 8 months ago. Alexander arrives carrying a small gift, something he's clearly put more thought into than the wrapping suggests. "For the dorm room," he explains, watching Lily unwrap a small framed photograph. The original, carefully restored and duplicated, his father's youthful smile and Marianne's protective embrace preserved permanently now for Lily to carry forward into her own future. "So I remember where I came from," Lily says softly, tracing the image with careful fingers, "even while I'm figuring out where I'm going." "Exactly," Alexander says, something warm and unguarded in his expression that would have been unrecognizable to anyone who knew him a year ago. Marianne watches the exchange from across the room, eyes bright with quiet, overwhelming gratitude, watching a family that started as strangers slowly, genuinely become something far more permanent. Later, after most guests have gone, Alexander finds himself on the same back porch where difficult conversations once unfolded, now simply a comfortable place to sit and watch the evening settle over a neighborhood that feels increasingly like somewhere he belongs to. "You know," Marianne says, joining him, "David would have liked you. He always said the measure of a man was what he did when nobody was watching. I think my father understood that better than I ever gave him credit for," Alexander says quietly. "I spent years assuming power was the only inheritance worth protecting. He was trying to teach me something different the entire time. I just wasn't paying close enough attention. And now I think the only legacy actually worth building is one where people never have to beg for basic dignity," Alexander says. "Where protection doesn't require desperation to unlock it." Marianne smiles, watching Lily through the window, laughing with friends, safe and thriving in ways that once felt impossibly out of reach. That's the thing worth remembering about hidden kindness, isn't it? Marianne spent years believing her family's survival depended entirely on secrecy, on quiet gratitude never fully spoken aloud. Alexander spent decades believing his father's legacy was built purely on calculated power and careful business decisions. Both of them learned, through one desperate afternoon and a faded photograph, that the truest inheritances are often the ones nobody ever thought to mention out loud. The quiet debts honored without recognition, the protection offered without conditions, the kindness that asks for nothing in return except the chance to keep existing exactly as it always was. So here's the question worth sitting with tonight. If you discovered a hidden kindness someone in your own family had quietly carried for decades, would you have the courage to continue it, even knowing it might never earn you public credit or recognition? And if you were the one desperately needing help the way Marianne once was, would you find the courage to ask even after years of believing you had to carry everything alone? Tell me in the comments. Do you believe the quiet kindnesses we never hear about are sometimes the ones that matter most?